Counting days in a Texas unit. Every morning, in prisons across Texas, thousands of men wake up and do the same thing. They count. Not money. Not steps. Days. Days since they arrived. Days until a parole hearing? Or days until a sentence that may never end. Inside the Texas prison system, time moves differently. For some prisoners, every second feels endless. For others, time is the only thing they have left. This is the story of what it really means to count days in a Texas unit, inside one of the largest prison systems in the world.
Before we dive into today's powerful story, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more gripping tales. Your support helps us keep sharing these stories, and we wouldn't want you to miss any of the action. Now, let's get started.
The Texas prison system. The Texas Department of Criminal Justice, known as TDCJ, operates one of the largest prison systems in the United States. As of recent official reports, the system supervises over 130,000 incarcerated individuals in state prisons and state jails across Texas. These facilities range from minimum security agricultural units to maximum security prisons housing individuals convicted of serious violent crimes. Many of these prisons sit in remote rural areas. Some are surrounded by farmland. Others are built on land that once held plantations. For decades, Texas has relied on prison labor programs, large housing units, and strict daily routines designed to maintain order among thousands of incarcerated people. But inside those walls, daily life follows a rigid rhythm. Wake up, eat, work, return to a cell, and repeat. For prisoners serving long sentences, or life sentences, the routine becomes something else entirely. A way of measuring survival. Because in Texas prisons, many inmates mark time in a simple way. They count days. Arrival, the first day. For most prisoners, the counting begins the moment they arrive. In Texas, newly sentenced inmates are first transported to TDCJ intake facilities, where they undergo a classification process. One of the primary locations for this is the Bird Unit in Huntsville, often called the Walls Transfer Facility. Here, inmates are photographed, fingerprinted, medically screened, and assigned identification numbers. They are issued prison clothing. Their personal belongings are cataloged or discarded. For many inmates, this moment is the first time the reality of prison truly sinks in. Because after intake, the system decides where they will live. Classification officers review multiple factors: criminal history, sentence length, behavioral risk, security concerns. Based on those assessments, prisoners are assigned to different types of units across the state. Some go to agricultural prisons. Some to high-security units. And some, particularly those convicted of violent crimes, are placed in maximum security facilities. But the most important number assigned during this process isn't a cell number. It's the TDCJ offender number. Inside the system, inmates are often identified more by that number than by their name. From that moment forward, the system tracks everything. Every transfer. Every disciplinary report. Every parole review. And every day served. For prisoners entering the system for the first time, those days can feel impossible to imagine. Because Texas sentences can be long. Very long. Life inside the unit. The routine begins. Inside a Texas prison unit, every day begins almost the same way. The lights come on early. Often before sunrise. Guards walk the housing areas, calling out instructions while inmates begin getting out of their bunks. In dormitory-style housing, dozens of prisoners may sleep in the same large room. In higher security units, inmates wake inside small two-man cells behind steel doors. Within minutes, the first official activity of the day takes place. Count. Correctional officers verify that every prisoner assigned to the unit is physically present. In Texas prisons, counts happen multiple times each day. Officers check housing areas and record the exact number of inmates inside each section of the facility. If the numbers don't match official records, the unit goes into count lockdown. Movement stops until every person is accounted for. The system is simple but critical. In facilities holding hundreds or sometimes thousands of prisoners, accurate counts are the foundation of security. For inmates, it becomes another marker of time. One more moment in a day measured by routine. Breakfast and movement. After morning count, inmates begin moving to their first destination of the day. For most units, that destination is the Chow Hall. Movement inside Texas prisons is tightly controlled. Prisoners often walk in organized lines or groups while correctional officers supervise the process. Inside the dining hall, meals are served quickly. The Texas Department of Criminal Justice provides standardized menus designed to meet nutritional guidelines while keeping costs low. Meals typically include basic items such as eggs, cereal, beans, bread, and fruit depending on the day. Prisoners usually have only a short amount of time to eat before being directed to leave. In some units, meals last less than 20 minutes. Once breakfast ends, the facility transitions into the next stage of the day. Work. Work details. Texas prisons have long relied on inmate labor programs. Many units sit on large tracts of land where prisoners work in agriculture. These work assignments can include harvesting crops, maintaining prison grounds, cleaning buildings, or assisting in prison industries such as manufacturing or furniture production. According to TDCJ reports, thousands of inmates participate in work programs each year. Some assignments are voluntary. Others are required depending on an inmate's classification and physical ability. For prisoners assigned to agricultural units, workdays can begin early and last several hours under the Texas sun. Historically, this system has drawn criticism from advocacy groups who argue that prison labor programs resemble earlier forms of forced labor used in southern prisons. Texas officials have defended the programs, saying they teach skills and help maintain prison operations. The debate over prison labor continues today. But for inmates inside the units, the workday has another meaning. It breaks up time. Hours spent working are hours not spent inside a cell. And when your life is measured in years, or decades, every hour matters. The cell. Eventually, every inmate returns here. The cell. For some prisoners, cells are shared with another inmate. For others, especially those in higher security units, cells can become spaces of near total isolation for large portions of the day. Typical Texas prison cells are small. They often include 2 metal bunks, a steel toilet and sink combination, a narrow window or no window at all. Inside these tight spaces, inmates spend long stretches of time locked in. Some read, some exercise, some write letters to family members, and some begin tracking time in a very specific way. They mark the walls. Small scratches, lines on paper calendars, or numbers written in notebooks. Each mark represents another day survived inside the system. For prisoners serving long sentences, these marks can become a ritual. A way to maintain control over something in an environment where almost everything else is controlled by the institution. Counting days. For many inmates, the habit of counting days begins almost immediately. Some track time until their first parole eligibility date. Others count toward projected release. And some simply count because it helps maintain a sense of progress. Psychologists who study incarceration have observed that long-term prisoners often develop personal systems for measuring time. Calendars, journals, tally marks. These systems serve a psychological purpose. They break large sentences into smaller pieces. One day becomes a week. Weeks become months. Months slowly become years. Without that structure, time inside prison can feel endless. Former inmates interviewed by researchers have described how losing track of time can affect mental health. Counting days, for some prisoners, becomes a way to maintain focus on the future, even when that future remains uncertain. Hope, discipline, and isolation. Waiting for parole. For many inmates in Texas prisons, the most important date in their sentence isn't the day they arrived. It's the day they become eligible for parole. Texas operates a parole system that reviews certain prisoners after they serve a required portion of their sentence. The exact eligibility date depends on several factors, including the type of offense, the sentence length, and whether the conviction falls under specific sentencing laws. In some cases, inmates may become eligible after serving a percentage of their sentence. In others, particularly for violent crimes, parole eligibility may not come for decades. The process itself happens outside the prison unit. Members of the Texas Board of Pardons and Paroles review an inmate's case file. This includes criminal history, disciplinary records, participation in rehabilitation programs, and statements from victims or their families. The board then votes on whether parole should be granted or denied. In many cases, the decision is made without the inmate appearing in person. For prisoners inside Texas units, the waiting period leading up to a parole review can be intense. Some begin preparing months in advance. They enroll in educational programs, complete job assignments, or avoid disciplinary violations. Because every entry in their record can affect the outcome. But even with preparation, the decision is never guaranteed. According to data from the Texas Board of Pardons and Paroles, many inmates are denied parole during their first review. When that happens, the board typically sets a future date for reconsideration. Sometimes 1 year later. Sometimes longer. And when the decision arrives, inmates often hear about it in a simple way. A printed notice. A message delivered by staff. Or word spreading through the housing unit. For someone who has been counting days for years, the result can change everything. Or nothing. Discipline and rules. Life inside a prison unit is controlled by rules. Hundreds of them. The Texas Department of Criminal Justice maintains a detailed disciplinary system that governs inmate behavior. Violations can range from minor infractions to serious offenses. Examples include refusing orders from staff, possessing contraband, fighting with another inmate, damaging state property. When an inmate is accused of breaking a rule, the case is typically reviewed through an internal disciplinary process. This process may involve a hearing where evidence is presented and the inmate can respond to the charge. If the inmate is found guilty, several penalties may apply. These can include loss of privileges, reduction in recreation time, loss of commissary access, or time spent in more restrictive housing for prisoners who are eligible for parole. Disciplinary records can also affect their future review. Because the parole board often considers institutional behavior when deciding whether someone is ready to re-enter society. Inside the units, the disciplinary system becomes another part of daily life. Another factor inmates must navigate carefully while serving their sentences: solitary confinement. Some prisoners in Texas units spend their days under far more restrictive conditions. They are placed in what the system calls administrative segregation, commonly referred to as solitary confinement. In these units, inmates are typically held alone in small cells for most of the day. According to TDCJ policies, prisoners in administrative segregation may spend around 22 to 24 hours per day inside their cells. Meals are delivered through slots in the door. Recreation time, when allowed, may occur in enclosed individual areas rather than shared yards. Administrative segregation is often used for inmates considered high security risks. This can include individuals accused of serious disciplinary violations, gang affiliation, or threats to the safety of staff or other prisoners. However, the use of long-term solitary confinement has been the subject of significant debate. Advocates and researchers have raised concerns about the psychological effects of extended isolation. Studies from organizations such as the National Institute of Justice and various academic institutions have linked prolonged solitary confinement to increased risks of anxiety, depression, and other mental health issues. Texas officials have stated that administrative segregation is necessary for maintaining safety within the prison system. Over the years, the state has also implemented certain reforms aimed at reducing the number of inmates held in long-term isolation. But for those who remain in these units, daily life becomes even more repetitive. Days pass in near silence. And counting time may become one of the only routines left. Life sentences. Some prisoners inside Texas units are not counting down to release, because their sentences may never end. Texas law allows for life sentences, and in some cases life without parole, depending on the crime and the year the sentence was issued. For inmates serving life without parole, the prison unit may become their permanent home. Their daily routine remains the same year after year. Meals, work assignments, counts, cell time. For others serving life sentences with parole eligibility, the timeline can still stretch decades into the future. Some inmates do not become eligible for parole until they have served 30 or 40 years of their sentence. During that time, prison life continues exactly as it does for everyone else. They work jobs, attend programs, follow rules, and wait. Over time, long-term prisoners often develop deep familiarity with the rhythms of the institution. Some become mentors to younger inmates. Others focus on education or religious programs. But the passage of time remains a constant presence. Years marked in notebooks. Birthdays remembered from inside the walls. And sometimes, the quiet realization that more years may still lie ahead. Inside a Texas prison unit, time moves differently. For some men, every day is a step closer to freedom. For others, it's simply another mark on a calendar that may never end. But behind the walls, the routine continues: counts, work, meals, and the quiet ritual of counting days. Stories like this remind us that prisons are not just institutions. They are places where real people live out years of their lives, shaped by decisions, consequences, and a system built to confine them. If you found this documentary informative, make sure to subscribe to Life Behind Bars for more deep dives into the realities of prisons, crime, and the justice system around the world. And if you want to see more stories like this, let us know in the comments. Until next time, stay curious, and thanks for watching.